Okay.
Alright, so explorers, now that we have gotten familiar with a few different types of knives, and if you don't know what type of knife you have, ask an adult or somebody else who's familiar with it, and they'll be able to help you out with learning more about what type of knife you have and the proper usage of that knife. So now we are going to go into the actual knife usage. So the first thing that you do, before you unsheath your knife or open up your knife, you want to check around to make sure that you don't have anybody in what we call your blood circle. So your blood circle is basically a circle around you, and that anybody inside of that, if you accidentally cut them, would bleed. So it's anybody who you could reach with your knife. So the way that I test that is I open up my hands, I think about how long my knife is going to extend out beyond my hand, and I just do a full circle. Now one thing that I see a lot of explorers do is they actually take out their knife and they check it with...
Oh!
And if I were sitting right next to Matt or another explorer,
yikes,
I could actually really injure them as I'm testing with a live blade, an open blade.
That does not seem like a good idea to me, Drew.
Not at all. So, that's the first thing to do, is check to make sure that you are in a safe place with your knife and that nobody else is around you. With your blood circle, it's important to make sure that if you notice as you are working with your knife, that if somebody comes into your blood circle, the first thing you do is stop. The second thing you do is bring awareness to the fact that you have an open, active knife. So you say, "Hey Matt, I'm using a knife. Would you please step out of my blood circle?" If you are in an area that you want to use your knife and there's a bunch of people around, then it's up to you to decide to get up and just move to an area where you are safe. So now we've established that we are in a safe place to use our knife. So we are going to start whittling. And the first thing that we need to talk about is form. So you don't want to move around at all. You want to either be standing or sitting in one place. And if you're sitting, I like to always sit while I'm working just because it's a little bit more comfortable. It's important to have your knees out and use your knife right in between your legs. So you never want to carve forward onto your knee.
Oh!
Yeah, no good.
Can I see that again? Ow!
Oh, yeah.
Don't do that.
And you also want to make sure that you're aware of where your hand is on the knife. I see a lot of explorers cut themselves because their fingers are out and they are using their knife right here, and this is a really easy spot to get cut. So always gripping your the stick or maybe the spoon or whatever it is that you are working with firmly with your non-cutting hand. You hold your knife firmly in your cutting hand and always cutting away from your body and always cutting away from other people. You can see how easily this comes off. Now one thing that's also important to know, that a sharp knife is a lot easier to use than a dull knife. If I have a dull knife, I sometimes have to force it, and it really, I have to put a lot of force behind it and a lot of muscle, and it's easy just to and the knife can slip and hurt yourself or somebody else.
Dangerous for you, and also not a good idea for what you're carving.
No, you see how big of a chunk just came
Oh,
out?
geez. What if he was trying to carve a chopstick or starting off with a great form, and then all of a sudden he lost it all? So having a sharp knife is a good idea. So now that we've got a basic idea of the tool and of safe ways to use it, let's look at the very beginning steps of carving. When I carve something, I love to start with an appreciation of the wood itself. Before I ever touch that blade to that wood, I love to just look at it and say, wow, this is an amazing piece of wood. And the more the more I look at wood, the more fascinated I am by it. I love the smell and the feel of it, and I love to get to know different types of wood. What we have here is a Western red cedar. It's what we have most of you start out with, and it's just a great simple wood. to work with. As I'm looking at that wood and I'm about to carve, another thing that I like to do is try to get an image in my mind of what I'm hoping to carve. I want to see it in the wood before I start to carve it. So often we get that idea, and I see explorers do it, and I do it myself, where I'll say, okay, I'm going to carve a chopstick, and I'll just start carving. Next thing you know, I'm just carving for the sake of carving, and I've carved half of my stick off, and the other half is this big fat thing, and I'm thinking, so that doesn't look anything like a chopstick. So get that image in my mind, hold the image, and then try to carve toward that image, always holding that image in mind. So, getting some good safety. I know no one's around me. I've got a firm grip on my blade. I feel pretty confident with it. So now let's look at some finite points of usage. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have a decent grip with the wood itself. Not so hard that I'm squeezing hard, but not so soft that the wood's going to slip when I start to carve. Firm. A nice firm grip. Same with the knife itself. You don't need to grip it till your knuckles are white. Just grip it enough so that you have control of that blade. When I start to carve, what I'll do is, I know that the closer that I carve to the handle here, the more control I will have over my stroke. There are different strokes that we'll work with as we get more into the art of carving. But for now, just for a nice long shave, I'm going to cut really close to that handle. The other thing that I'm looking for is, check this out. Okay, if I'm starting to, I just want to carve a long thin shave off of that. Am I going to carve at that angle? No. All you want to do is, you can imagine maybe like a quarter or maybe a couple quarters, depending on how much you're going to shave off underneath this part of the blade. You see that? And then I'm just going to go for a long thin stroke. What I'm looking for when I start to carve is those long thin shavings. The more I can get those guys, the more control I know I have. And I notice that as time goes on, oftentimes explorers and myself will start to go further and further out, and the further and further out you go, the less control you have. So try to keep it in there. Try to keep long, smooth strokes. Alright. So that's a good, we've got a good synopsis of knife safety and usage right now, and now we're just going to go through a few basic practices that are just good knife practice.
So some of you at some point might want to share your knife with another explorer, and that's fine if everybody is okay with that, if the person who is lending the knife is okay with that. So if you are passing your knife to another explorer, it's a good practice to pass it handle out always, so that you're keeping that other person safe. So if that is the case, you'll need to hold it by the blade itself. Now, do you think that you should hold the blade on the sharp side or the dull side? Probably the dull side, right? You should hold it by the back, so that you have a nice easy grip, that the sharp side is going away from you, so that you don't cut yourself as you pass it over to another person. And then passing the knife to the person who's going to be using it, make sure that you have eye contact with them, so that they're not often looking at something else and they don't know that they're about to have a knife shoved at them. So pass it over handle first.
Thank you, Drew.
You're welcome, Matt.
Alright.
And now we have a knife exchange.
Excellent. And just one other thing that has come up for us that we've seen a lot of explorers do is that when you're done with your knife, when you're not using it, see a couple things. One is to just set the knife down right on the ground. Always sheathe your knife. do not have a live blade out there. You might step on it, your friend might step on it, or it could just get jammed into the ground. Some explorers, even when they're done with their knife, just jam it into the ground. One problem with that is that it will dull your blade like nothing else. There are little rocks in there, even little grains of sand, that'll put little nicks in that knife that will make it a lot harder to use, and you'll just have to do more maintenance. So always take good care of your tool, and take care of the safety with that.
And if you have a opening blade, there's a hinge that allows your blade to open. And you'll notice that the gunkier or the dirtier that hinge gets, the harder it is to both open and close your knife. So setting your folding blade or your opening knife down on the ground can also gunk up that hinge and make it so that your knife is just not as easy to use. It's not as easy to lock anymore either.
Great. Well, I think that's it for the knife safety and usage. We're so excited about this art and sharing the real craftsmanship of using a knife. It's a big privilege and a wonderful experience. So there's a lot more to this journey, and let's keep doing it and keep exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
All right.